The academy was silent, its towering stone walls casting long shadows across the courtyard. The only sound was the faint whisper of wind against ancient trees. But there was something else, something unsettling hanging in the air, something waiting to be discovered. Alara stepped into the centre of the courtyard, her breath catching in her chest. She was used to the stillness of the academy, but today it felt different. The air seemed to hum with a faint electric charge, and the usual feeling of safety she had here felt distant. It was as if something or someone was watching her every move. She shook off the feeling, pushing her dark curly hair behind her ears, and adjusted the leather strap of the satchel hanging across her chest. The Magic Academy had been her home for the past 6 years, a place where she had trained to harness the power of the elements, a place she had come to love, despite its many secrets. Alara had always been drawn to the ancient ways of magic, fascinated by the balance between light and shadow, life and death, and the endless possibilities within the arcane. But today she felt an unease she could not explain, a sense of dread that had been creeping up on her since last night. Her hands trembled slightly as she entered the grand hall, a place so familiar, yet so foreboding. She could hear the faint rustle of paper from the library behind its heavy oak doors, and the sound of murmurs as students practiced their spells in the courtyard beyond. But Alara wasn't interested in the usual humdrum of her daily life. She had to find answers. For years she had felt a deep, unexplained connection to something within the academy's walls, something ancient and powerful. A mysterious book had been left in her care, an old tome bound in black leather with strange glowing runes etched into its cover. At first she had believed it to be just another artifact of magic, but as the days passed, the book had begun to show signs of power beyond anything she had ever encountered. It was as if the book was alive, pulsing with energy, whispering her name in the dead of night. And then there were the dreams that had begun only a few weeks ago, terrifying visions of a dark, swirling vortex of shadows that spoke in voices of long-lost souls. The dreams always ended the same way, with a single cryptic sentence. The balance will break. Alara had dismissed it at first, chalking it up to stress or exhaustion, but the more she thought about it, the more she realised something was terribly wrong. The whispers from the book had grown louder, more insistent, and with each passing day, she could feel the balance of magic in the academy shifting, tilting dangerously in one direction. She made her way down the dimly lit hall, each step echoing off the cold stone floors. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the weight of the book pressing against her side as if urging her forward. Alara had always been a curious and determined soul, but something about this journey she was about to undertake, felt different. It wasn't just her own life at risk anymore, it was the kingdom itself. Alara had grown up in the city of Rivaria, a place where magic flowed through the streets like water, a place where every citizen was born with the potential to wield some form of power. But her family had been different. Her parents, both renowned sorcerers, had been killed when she was just a child. Their deaths, however, remained a mystery, and the academy had taken her in, offering her a place among its ranks. But Alara's parents were not just any sorcerers. They had been among the few who had unlocked the deepest, most dangerous secrets of magic. Secrets that were lost to time, guarded by only a handful of powerful wizards. They had left behind clues, fragments of knowledge, all leading to something that, if unleashed, could change the fate of the world. As she approached the library, Alara paused, her hand resting on the cold iron door handle. She had always trusted the headmaster, a kind and wise man named Master Arden, but there was something about him she could not ignore. A shift in his demeanour, a certain coldness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He knew more about her parents' deaths than he let on, and she was certain he knew more about the secrets of the academy than he was willing to share. Her heart pounded as she pushed the door open, the musty smell of old paper and ink flooding her senses. The library was vast, its shelves towering over her, filled with tomes of magic, history, and forgotten lore. At the far end, behind a massive wooden desk, stood Master Arden, his silver beard flowing down to his chest, his long dark robes swirling as he turned to face her. "Alara," he said, his voice calm but with a hint of something else. "You've come. I was expecting you." She straightened, her eyes narrowing. "You know why I'm here?" Arden didn't respond immediately. Instead, he motioned for her to sit in the chair across from him. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting dancing shadows across the room. "You've been digging into things you shouldn't," he said softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Some knowledge is not meant to be unearthed." Alara's pulse quickened. "I have to know. I have to understand what happened to my parents. And what's happening to this academy. The book. It's leading me somewhere dangerous." The headmaster's expression darkened. "You don't understand the consequences of your actions, Alara. The balance of magic is fragile. If you continue down this path, you risk not only your own life but the lives of everyone in the kingdom." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean? What are you hiding from me?" Arden took a deep breath, his voice heavy with regret. "The secrets you seek have the power to destroy everything. Your parents were not killed by accident. They were trying to stop something that now you may be destined to finish. And if you fail..." The room seemed to shrink as Alara's heart raced in her chest. "If I fail, what? The kingdom will fall." The words hung in the air, a heavy weight that settled over her like a dark cloud. Alara's mind reeled. She had never expected this. All her life she had sought the truth, but she never imagined it would lead to something this horrifying. Her hand gripped the edge of the chair. "I won't let that happen. I can't. I won't fail." Arden's gaze softened for a moment, but his expression remained grim. "You may not have a choice." Alara stood, determination flooding her veins. She had no idea what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain. She was the only one who could uncover the truth and stop whatever dark force was threatening to tear everything apart. With a final, resolute glance at Master Arden, she turned and walked out of the library, ready to face whatever came next. The balance of power was shifting, and it was up to her to restore it before it was too late. Alara had barely stepped into the moonlit courtyard when a strange sound caught her attention. It was a soft whisper at first, like the wind brushing through the leaves, but then it grew louder, more distinct, as though something was calling her name. "Alara!" Her breath hitched in her throat. The voice was unmistakable. It was the voice from the book. Her hands instinctively grasped the leather-bound tome hidden beneath her cloak, the faint glow of its runes pulsing as if in response. She had not meant to open it tonight, but the book had a way of forcing her hand, urging her to listen. Without thinking, Alara followed the sound, her feet moving of their own accord, leading her toward the farthest corner of the academy grounds near the Forbidden Tower, a place she had never dared to enter. The tower loomed before her now, its stone walls shrouded in shadow, the ivy creeping up like fingers seeking to hold it in place. The air around it seemed thick, almost suffocating, as though the very essence of the academy itself avoided this part of the grounds. "Alara!" The voice was clearer now, more insistent. It beckoned her closer, urging her to approach the tower's crumbling base. Her pulse quickened. There were stories told among the students, whispers about the tower, stories of those who ventured too close and never returned. No one really knew what lay inside, only that it was a place of great danger, forbidden to all but the highest-ranking mages. The headmaster had warned them time and time again, never go near the tower, never speak of it. Yet here she was, standing at its threshold, the book pulsing with an unnatural rhythm in her hands. "Alara, come closer." The whisper now sounded like a plea. But there was something cold beneath it, something that sent a shiver down her spine. "Who's there?" Alara called, her voice steady despite the terror that clung to her. There was no answer, but the air seemed to ripple and the stone beneath her feet trembled slightly, as though the tower itself was alive, reacting to her presence. Without a second thought, Alara stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The book hummed with energy, urging her onward. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. Her breath caught as she reached the heavy iron door that stood at the base of the tower. The door was old, rusted, and scarred with age, but as Alara laid a hand on it, it swung open with a creak, as though it had been waiting for her. Inside, the tower was pitch dark, the air thick with dust, and a heavy, almost oppressive silence, but she felt it, the weight of something ancient, something powerful, pressing down on her. The darkness seemed to swirl around her, alive with the energy of ages past. Alara's hands trembled as she stepped inside, the book in her grasp glowing softly, casting faint light on the stone walls. Alara, she whirled around, her heart racing. The voice was right behind her now, and yet no one was there. The stone beneath her feet rumbled once more, and suddenly the floor beneath her gave way. A blast of wind exploded upward, throwing her back against the wall. Alara gasped, her hands clutching the book, but she managed to keep her balance. What is happening? She whispered to herself, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Before she could react, a low, guttural growl echoed through the tower's depths. The air grew colder, and Alara's blood turned to ice. She wasn't alone. Someone was watching her. "Who are you?" Alara called out, her voice trembling despite her efforts to sound strong. "What do you want from me?" There was no answer, only the slow, steady sound of something large moving through the shadows. Her heart pounded in her chest as the whispers returned, now mingling with the deep growl that sent waves of dread through her entire body. "Alara!" The voice was soft again, like a caress, but there was an edge to it now, an edge that chilled her to the bone. Suddenly a flash of light blazed through the darkness. Alara gasped and shielded her eyes as a figure stepped forward from the shadows. A man, tall and imposing, draped in dark robes that shimmered with ancient symbols. His face was obscured by a hood, but his presence radiated power, dark power that made the very air feel suffocating. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure said, his voice deep, like the rumbling of distant thunder. Alara's heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" she demanded, struggling to keep her voice steady. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a slow step toward her, his movements deliberate, measured. The darkness seemed to bend around him, following his every gesture. "You've disturbed something that has lain dormant for centuries," he continued, his voice almost a whisper. "You are meddling with forces beyond your understanding." Alara's grip on the book tightened. "I need answers. The Academy, my parents, they died for this." "I'm not afraid." The figure chuckled darkly. "Brave words for someone so young, but bravery will not save you from the consequences of your actions." Before Alara could respond, the floor beneath her trembled again, more violently this time. The tower seemed to groan, the very walls shaking with a force that seemed to come from deep within. A cold, gusting wind howled through the chamber, and Alara could feel the magic in the air, the raw, unbridled power of something ancient and dangerous awakening. The figure's eyes glinted with something akin to amusement. But there was no warmth in his gaze, only the promise of destruction. "You've unleashed it," he said, his tone almost mocking. "The balance is broken, and now there is no turning back." Alara's blood ran cold as she realized the truth of his words. The book, the whispers, the dreams, all of it had been leading her here to this moment. The Academy, her family, the kingdom, it was all connected to the dark power hidden within this tower. And now it was waking. No, I didn't mean..." Alara stammered, panic rising in her chest. The figure stepped forward, placing a cold hand on her shoulder. "It's too late for regrets." In that moment, everything clicked into place. The Academy's secrets, the cryptic messages, the broken balance, all of it had led her to this terrifying truth. The magic she had been taught to control was nothing compared to the power buried beneath the tower, and it was now free, slipping through cracks in the world that were never meant to be opened. "Alara, you must choose," the figure said, his voice low and threatening. "Will you join me in wielding this power, or will you watch everything you love burn to the ground?" The air grew heavier, suffocating, as Alara stood at the crossroads of her destiny. What had started as a search for answers had become a race to stop a catastrophe. She knew one thing for certain. The balance of power in the kingdom was no longer hers to protect. It had been stolen, and now she had to decide whether to fight back or surrender to the darkness. The tower groaned as if responding to the figure's dark words, and Alara's breath caught in her throat. The air was thick with tension, the magic swirling around her like a storm. The ancient power that had been dormant for so long was awake, and it was far beyond her ability to control. The figure's eyes gleamed with something close to satisfaction. "You've unleashed a force far more dangerous than you realise, child," he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it rang in the hollow chambers of the tower like a death knell. Alara took a step back, the weight of his words crashing into her chest. "What have I done?" she murmured, her fingers tightening around the book, as though it were the only thing holding her together. She had come here to uncover the truth, to learn what had happened to her parents, but now the truth felt like a burden too heavy to bear. Before she could react, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble, a violent shake that sent her stumbling. The wind howled louder, and the tower seemed to breathe, its stones shifting and grinding like teeth. It was as if the entire structure were alive, reacting to the power now swirling in the air. The figure's laughter echoed around her, cruel and unrelenting. "You should have listened. The Academy has been hiding the truth from you for years. Now it's too late." Alara could feel it. The magic had changed. It was no longer the familiar, controlled energy she had learned to wield in the Academy. This was something darker, more primal, and it was starting to crack open the very fabric of reality. The walls of the tower began to shimmer, as though they were dissolving into the air itself. "Alara!" the figure called again, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Come with me. Together we can harness this power, reshape the world as it should be." Alara hesitated, her mind racing. There was no way she could join him. Whatever he was offering, it wasn't salvation. It was destruction. She couldn't trust him. But just as she made up her mind to flee, something shifted in the air. A pulse, deep and heavy, as though the earth itself were holding its breath. A deep, bone-chilling growl echoed through the chamber, sending a shiver down her spine. From the shadows emerged a shape, massive and dark, its eyes glowing with a terrible hunger. The figure stepped back, a wicked smile curling on his lips. "Ah! You've met my companion. He's quite protective of me." Alara's heart raced. The creature was enormous, its form shifting and flickering like smoke. It wasn't human, but it wasn't entirely beast either. Its eyes were the only solid part of it, glowing a fierce red. Alara instinctively reached for her magic, but it was no use. The power in the tower was blocking her. The book in her hands trembled, its runes flickering erratically. "Stay back!" she shouted, her voice trembling as she stepped backward, her feet skidding against the stone floor. The creature growled louder, its form shifting in response to her fear. It was closing in on her, and there was no way out. Then, in an instant, the wind changed. A sharp, piercing whistle cut through the chaos, followed by a loud crack, like thunder splitting the heavens. The creature froze mid-step, its glowing eyes flickering, before it turned its gaze toward the source of the sound. Alara didn't waste a moment. She ran, her legs moving faster than they ever had before, but the path was unclear, the tower itself shifting and warping around her. The ground shook again, and a deep rumble filled the air as if the entire kingdom were on the brink of collapse. Her heart pounded in her chest as she darted through the halls, desperately searching for an exit. The book pulsed in her hands, more urgent now, as if it was calling her to a specific place. She had no choice but to follow it. Her mind raced. "I need to get out. I need to stop this. What happened to my parents? What did they know?" But the tower itself seemed to have come alive in response to her desperation. Doors slammed shut in front of her, walls shifted, and the passageways twisted and narrowed, as if the very structure were trying to trap her inside. Alara stumbled forward, breathless and disoriented, the book's pull growing stronger with each passing second. And then she saw it, a faint glow at the far end of the hall. The light beckoned her, promising answers. She pushed forward, ignoring the shouts of the figure behind her, the roar of the creature that followed. She didn't have time to think. As she neared the light, she crashed into something, someone, a body, a figure emerging from the shadows. "Alara!" a familiar voice called. She looked up, her heart skipping a beat. It was Master Arden. "Master?" she gasped, hardly believing her eyes. "What are you doing here?" He grabbed her by the arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "There's no time! You have to come with me. It's too dangerous for you to be here alone." Before she could protest, he was pulling her into a side room, the door slamming shut behind them. The sound of the creature's growl echoed through the walls, and Alara's heart raced as the tower seemed to tremble around them. "What is happening?" she demanded. Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Master Arden's face was grim. "There's no time for explanations, Alara. You need to understand that the power you've unleashed is not something the Academy can control. It was never meant to be freed." The room was small, dimly lit, but there was a strange warmth in the air that calmed Alara's nerves just slightly. "What do we do?" she asked, desperation flooding her voice. "The kingdom, everything. It's all falling apart." He looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "There is only one way to stop it. You have to close the rift you've opened, but it's going to require more than just willpower. You'll need a sacrifice." Alara felt her stomach twist. "A sacrifice? What do you mean?" Master Arden hesitated, his gaze flickering to the book in her hands. "There is a spell, a binding spell that can seal the rift, but it requires an anchor, someone who has the power to channel the magic." Alara's mind raced, but before she could process his words, the room shook again, more violently this time. The creature's growl was now a low, vibrating hum that seemed to permeate the very air. "Alara," Master Arden said urgently, his voice sharp, "you have to trust me. I'm here to help, but we must act fast." Alara swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She didn't understand fully, but one thing was clear. The time to act was now. She was caught in the heart of a storm, and if she didn't find a way to control the magic, everything she had fought for, the Academy, the kingdom, her family's legacy, would be lost, and the sacrifices had already begun. The air inside the tower had become suffocating, thick with the weight of magic and impending doom. The creature's growl reverberated through the walls like a low hum, its presence growing stronger with every passing second. Alara's heart raced in her chest as she stood beside Master Arden, her hands trembling with uncertainty. The book pulsed in her grasp, its runes glowing brighter as though it too understood the gravity of the situation. The magic in the room had become a living thing, shifting and swirling, waiting for her to make a decision. "Alara," Master Arden's voice cut through the noise of her thoughts. He was gripping her arm now, his eyes filled with urgency. "The rift is widening. If we don't act now, it will swallow the entire kingdom. We don't have time to waste. You must cast the binding spell." "But—" Alara swallowed hard, the weight of his words crashing down on her. "The sacrifice. You said I'd have to give something up. What does that mean?" Master Arden's gaze hardened. "It means you must give up something precious, something that ties you to this world." Her mind reeled. Something precious. What could she sacrifice? Her life? The Academy? Her dreams of uncovering the truth about her parents' deaths? The very idea felt impossible, yet the tower around her continued to tremble, as though the universe itself was pressing her toward an answer. Suddenly, the room shook with an earth-shattering crack. The walls groaned and the air vibrated with the power of the rift now fully unleashed. Alara's pulse thundered in her ears. She glanced at the book again, its runes shifting erratically as the creature's growls grew louder. "Alara!" Master Arden's voice was strained, desperate. "We don't have time. If you don't act, everything will be lost." With a deep breath, Alara looked around the room. The walls were crumbling, the very foundation of the tower threatening to collapse. She could feel the rift's pull, a dark energy seeping through the cracks, spreading like poison through the land. The creature's shadow loomed in the doorway, its glowing eyes fixed on her, hungry. Her fingers tightened around the book. She had no choice. The kingdom, her family's legacy, everything she had fought for was slipping away. She had to act, but the sacrifice, what could she give up? What was precious enough to stop this? The answer came to her like a cold breath. Her magic. Her heart froze in her chest. It was the one thing that had defined her, the one thing that had given her a purpose since she first entered the Academy. Without her magic, who would she be? She couldn't fathom a life without it, yet she knew deep down that this was the only way to seal the rift. The power that had been unleashed was too great, too dangerous to control. Only by relinquishing her connection to the magic that flowed through her could she restore balance. "Alara," Master Arden whispered as if reading her thoughts, "you must do it. The world depends on it." Tears welled in Alara's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She had to focus. The creature was getting closer, its massive form filling the doorway, its eyes glowing with malice. "Alara!" Master Arden urged again, his voice sharp with desperation. With trembling hands, Alara opened the book, the pages flickering as if responding to her intentions. She had studied the binding spell for years, but never had she imagined it would come to this. Never had she imagined she would have to give up everything she had worked for. The air around her crackled with power, and she could feel the rift's dark energy pulling at her, tempting her to give in. But she knew what she had to do. Closing her eyes, she whispered the incantation, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. The words of the spell flowed from her lips, ancient and powerful, as though they had been waiting for this moment. As the final syllable left her mouth, a wave of energy surged through her, and Alara gasped. Her vision blurred, and she felt the magic inside her, the magic that had defined her entire existence, begin to unravel. It was as if the very fabric of her being was being torn apart. The power that had once flowed freely through her veins now drained away, leaving her empty. The creature roared, a sound of fury and pain, as the magic surrounding Alara intensified. The room trembled, and the walls began to crack. She could feel the rift closing, but it was not without its price. Her body shook, her knees buckling beneath the weight of the spell. She had given everything, her magic, her identity, her future. It was all slipping away, and yet in that moment, as the tower seemed to collapse around her, Alara felt a strange peace. The creature lunged forward, but before it could reach her, a brilliant light erupted from the book in her hands. It enveloped her, filling the room with blinding light. The creature screamed in agony as the light consumed it, and with a final deafening roar, it vanished. The rift closed with a sudden, sharp crack, the sound echoing through the tower. The shaking of the ground ceased, and the oppressive air that had filled the room lifted. The silence that followed was deafening, and Alara stood there, breathless, her body trembling from the aftermath of the spell. Master Arden's voice broke the silence. "You did it!" he said, his tone a mix of awe and disbelief. But Alara didn't feel victorious. She felt empty, hollow. The magic that had once been her strength was gone, leaving behind only the shell of who she had been. She looked down at the book in her hands, its runes now dim and lifeless, as though it, too, mourned the loss of the magic it contained. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Master Arden stepped forward, his eyes filled with sympathy. "Now, you begin again. You've saved the kingdom, Alara. You've restored balance, but your journey is not over. There is still much to learn, much to rebuild." Alara looked up at him, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. She had sacrificed everything to save the world, but at what cost? She was no longer the girl who had entered the academy with dreams of mastering magic. She was something else now, someone else. The power she had fought so hard to control was gone, and with it, her old self. But as she looked out over the ruined tower, the first rays of dawn breaking through the sky, she knew one thing for certain: she would find a new path. The kingdom was safe, and for the first time in her life, Alara felt free. Free to rebuild, free to discover who she could be without the weight of magic defining her. And in that quiet moment, she realized that the greatest strength was not in the power she had wielded, but in the choice she had made to let go. The tower, now a crumbling ruin, stood silent under the pale light of the rising sun. The chaos had passed, the battle between light and shadow over. Yet, as the echoes of destruction faded into the distance, Alara felt an overwhelming stillness settle over her. The rift was sealed, the creature was gone, and the magic that had once surged through her veins was no more. Master Arden stood beside her, his features lined with wariness, but also something else: relief. The danger had passed, but neither of them could escape the heavy cost of what had just transpired. Alara stared down at her hands, now empty of magic. She could feel the weight of their loss pressing on her chest, like the remnants of an ancient storm. The power, once so vibrant, now felt like a distant memory, a fleeting dream. She closed her eyes, trying to remember the feeling of magic coursing through her, the sense of control and confidence it had brought. But it was gone, leaving only a hollow space inside her. "Alara," Master Arden's voice was soft, hesitant. "You've done it. The kingdom is safe. The rift is closed. You've saved us all." But her heart felt no joy. The very thing that had given her purpose, her magic, was now lost forever. What did that mean for her future? She wasn't sure she could even picture it without the magic that had defined her. What now? she whispered, her voice barely audible. Master Arden placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm but kind. Now you begin anew. You've earned your place among us, Alara, but the road ahead won't be easy. You'll have to find your own way without the magic that once guided you. Alara looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. She had never imagined a life without magic. It had been her dream, her obsession, her way of understanding the world. Without it, who would she be? What would she do? You are more than the magic that once flowed through you, Master Arden said gently, as if reading her mind. Magic does not define you. Your courage, your heart, your choices, that is what makes you who you are. Alara felt a lump form in her throat. His words were kind, but they did little to ease the ache that settled deep in her chest. She had saved the kingdom, but at what cost? She had given up everything, and now she had to rebuild from the ground up. The path ahead seemed uncertain, full of unknowns. A soft rustle behind them caught her attention. Turning, she saw a figure emerge from the shadows of the ruined tower, a familiar face. Arwen, the Academy's healer, her once stern expression now softened with concern. Alara, she said, her voice gentle but steady. Are you all right? Alara nodded slowly, though the truth was that she didn't feel all right. She felt lost, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The world around her had changed, and so had she. I'm not sure what comes next, Alara admitted, her voice trembling. I've lost everything. The magic, it was everything to me. And now I'm left with nothing. Arwen stepped closer, her presence calming in the midst of Alara's turmoil. You are not nothing, Alara. You've done something no one else could. You've saved us all. You have the chance to live a life that is truly your own. A life that is not defined by magic, but by who you choose to be. Alara blinked, her vision clouded with unshed tears. But I don't know who I am without it. Arwen smiled softly. Then you have the greatest adventure ahead of you, discovering who you are without magic, without the weight of the Academy's expectations. You have a chance to build your future on your own terms, and there are people here who will support you every step of the way. Alara swallowed hard, feeling the first stirrings of hope in the pit of her stomach. Maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild. Maybe she could find a new purpose, one that wasn't tied to magic. As they stood there, the sun rose higher in the sky, casting a warm, golden light over the ruins. The tower, once a symbol of power and mystery, was now just a memory. But in its place, a new dawn was breaking, both for Alara and for the kingdom she had saved. Thank you, Alara said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. For helping me see that. I don't know if I'm ready, but I'll try. I have to try. Arwen nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. That's all anyone can ask of you. You don't need to have all the answers right now. Take it one step at a time. The future will reveal itself in time. And with that, Alara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her choices settle on her shoulders. The road ahead would not be easy, but she was no longer the same person she had been when she entered the Academy. She had faced the darkness, made the ultimate sacrifice, and survived. And in that survival, she had found a strength she had never known before. As the days passed, Alara began to rebuild. She stayed at the Academy, but no longer as a student. She took on the role of a mentor, helping the next generation of magicians understand the true meaning of magic, not as a tool to wield, but as a force to respect. She taught them the lessons she had learned the hard way. That power, in all its forms, was not something to be controlled, but something to be understood and respected. Her bond with Master Arden deepened as he helped guide her on this new path. Together they worked to ensure that the Academy would never again be used to create such dangerous magic. The kingdom, though scarred, slowly began to heal. As the years passed, Alara found peace in her new life. She may have lost her magic, but she had gained something far more precious: understanding, wisdom, and a sense of self that no spell could ever give her. And when the people of the kingdom came to her for guidance, she could look them in the eye, not as a magician, but as someone who had faced the darkness and emerged stronger for it. The world had changed, but so had Alara. She had discovered who she was without magic, and in doing so had created a future that was her own, one that was free from the past, but shaped by the lessons of the journey. The rift had been sealed, but a new chapter in Alara's life was only just beginning. Alara stood at the edge of the academy's balcony, gazing out over the vast expanse of the kingdom below. The horizon stretched endlessly, the sun dipping low and casting golden hues across the land. It had been 5 years since the rift was closed, since the battle that had defined her journey. The magic she had once relied on was now a distant memory, but the strength she had gained from that trial had shaped her into someone new. She ran her fingers over the smooth stone railing, feeling the warmth of the fading sun. The academy, once a place of fear and ambition, had become her home again. Only now it was a place of peace, of understanding. She had found her purpose, not in magic, but in the lessons she could teach, the wisdom she had learned from her loss. The days had passed quietly, with the kingdom slowly recovering from the chaos that had almost torn it apart. Alara had taken on a new role, one that felt right, one that aligned with the person she had become. She had become a mentor to those who still came to the academy, eager to learn the secrets of magic, but now she taught them more than just spells. She taught them the importance of balance, of respecting the power they wielded, and of the responsibility that came with it. Master Arden had retired, passing the mantle of leadership to Alara, though she had never expected such a responsibility. The weight of it had taken time to settle, but now she wore it with quiet confidence. She had made peace with her loss, understanding that her true strength had always been within her. Magic had been a tool, not a defining feature of who she was. "Alara!" a voice called from behind her. She turned to see Arwen walking toward her, a warm smile on her face. The healer had been her steadfast companion, the one person who had never faltered in her belief that Alara would find her way. They had become close friends over the year, bond deepening as they worked together to rebuild the academy and the kingdom. "Arwen," Alara greeted her with a smile. "What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking," Arwen said, her voice thoughtful. "The kingdom is thriving again and the academy has grown stronger, but there's something I believe you should consider." Alara raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Arwen took a step closer, her expression serious. "The students here, they need a leader who understands not just magic, but the journey, the struggle. They need someone who has faced loss, who has emerged stronger because of it. They need someone who understands that life isn't about power, it's about how you choose to use what you have." Alara met her gaze, feeling the weight of the words. "And you think that someone should be me?" Arwen nodded. "You've already proved that you can lead, but you also need to understand, this role, it's not about you, it's about them, about the future of this kingdom and the choices they'll have to make. You've come so far, Alara. I believe you can guide them through the challenges ahead." Alara took a deep breath, looking out over the academy grounds. Her heart stirred with a sense of purpose. This was what she had been building toward all along, helping others, guiding them to understand that their strength came not from power, but from within. She had once been consumed by the desire for magic, for control. Now she understood that true power came from the choices one made. "I'm ready," Alara said finally, her voice steady and confident. "It's not going to be easy, but I'm ready." Arwen smiled, her eyes glistening with pride. "I knew you would be." As the days passed, Alara embraced her new role fully. She worked closely with the students, guiding them not just in the ways of magic, but in the understanding of themselves. She saw their struggles, their fears, their ambitions, and she helped them navigate their paths with the wisdom she had gained from her own journey. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first entered the academy. She had changed, and in her change she found a new strength, one that didn't rely on make but on understanding, compassion, and the courage to lead. The kingdom, too, was flourishing. The rift had been sealed, but the lessons learned from its existence lingered. The people of the kingdom were more united now. They are bound by the knowledge that true power came from within, not from the forces they could control. Alara had become a symbol of hope, a beacon of strength for those who sought guidance in times of uncertainty. One evening, as she sat in the academy's courtyard, watching the students practicing their magic in the distance, she was joined by Master Arden. He had remained a constant presence in her life, offering guidance when needed, though now it was more as a friend than a mentor. "Alara," he said softly, his voice filled with a sense of contentment, You've done something remarkable." She looked up at him, her heart warm with gratitude. "I've done what I could," he smiled, a twinkle in his eye. "No, you've done more than that. You've shown them all what true leadership is. You've given them something no spell can offer: wisdom, kindness, and the strength to choose what is right." Alara nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She had come a long way, from the young woman driven by ambition and power to the leader who understood the true meaning of strength. She had faced the darkness, faced her own fears and doubts, and had emerged stronger for it. And now she was leading others down a path she had once struggled to find herself. As the night settled in, with the stars shining brightly above, Alara felt a sense of peace. The journey had not been easy, and it had not always been certain. But she had found her way, and in doing so had helped the kingdom find its way too. The lessons she had learned would echo through the generations, shaping the future of the academy and the kingdom for years to come. And as she stood there looking up at the stars, Alara knew one thing for certain: her journey was far from over. The road ahead was still uncertain, still full of challenges, but she was no longer afraid. She had the strength to face whatever came next, not because of the magic she had lost, but because of the wisdom and courage she had gained. In the end, Alara had achieved something far greater than any magic could have offered. She had found herself, and that, she realized, was the greatest magic of all.